Welcome to the podcast, Bianca. It is great to have you. I'm so looking forward to this conversation and talking about your business, Bebo Mio. I think what you're doing is so incredible in supporting moms and also moms who or women who want to be entrepreneurs or anybody who wants to be an entrepreneur. I love it. We're going to have so much to talk about today. So welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Thank you so much. I mean, just the opportunity to talk about motherhood and entrepreneurship so closely connected. I'm really excited about it too. So before we jump in, why don't you tell us about your business and like your journey to starting it?
Oh man, it was rocky. And I started my business the week I had my baby, which is like something I just don't recommend. But it was fueled with this rage was my fuel. So I just had my daughter. My plan, my whole life was to go to medical school. So you spend a lot of time by the time you're in your mid-20s, like you've dedicated a lot of time to biology. And the relationship my doctor had to birth was so problematic, was so harmful, that was riddled with trauma that I took years to unpack, the obstetric violence that I experienced. And so I very quickly, literally like came home from the hospital and was like, whoa, what am I going to do? Like, I cannot be a part of that system. I was very naive about like what I expected OB-GYNs to do when I was doing my pre-med. And I just paced the house. I also was in a domestic violence situation. So like all around, I just had this mountain of harm heaped on me. And I was far from my family, didn't know anybody, under-resourced, like bad situation. And so I paced with my newborn and was like, what am I going to do about this situation? Like now I have a baby, and being a dependent with a dependent in an unsafe home is a very vulnerable situation to be in. And so I started thinking about the problems that I just come up against. And the first one was when I was unpacking my birth and thinking, like, I felt so alone. I had to work so hard to keep everybody out of my room. I trusted my body, which is something that I realized very quickly most people don't trust their body and trust the process. Like, I wasn't scared about birth. I'd seen my mom have illegal home births in our basement. So like I'd seen birth just really normal, like just I'd seen physiological birth, what it looks like uninterrupted, and it seemed just really cool to me. So I carried that story in, and I realized that most women and queer folks who are birthing don't have that story. And so I started going in as a protector into that space, which is also known as a birth doula. But I went in as a solving that problem. And then I started realizing there was more problems. Like if you lived in a plus size or fat or big body, whatever language feels good for you, worse things happen. If you were racialized, worse things happened. Queer folks, like it's terrible accessing healthcare as a queer individual. I'm a super lesbian, just to like qualify my my experience as a gay person accessing healthcare. And so these problems, I just kept like solving the next one, the next one, the next one. And as I turn around and look behind in my business almost 20 years later, it's turned into this incredible global movement to protect people in birth and parenting. And so we have students, my company's called Bebo Mia, and we have students in 49 countries. And we, teach people who typically want to do something after the experience that they had in birth. So most of my students come in because they've had birth trauma, or they felt underwhelmed by their birth, or PTSD from their birth, or they had a really magical birth experience. And they're like, that was incredible. Everybody should have that, because all I see is the opposite being communicated. So those are kind of the two main paths into my school. And and then you can specialize to do breastfeeding or chest feeding education, childbirth education, pre and postnatal doula work, pre and postnatal fitness work, like anything, any area of reproductive health and justice. And it's magical in my community. It's like truly a place of healing and a solution to this problem that we have, becoming dependents with dependence. So to gain, financial independence, and to do it in a way that's so deeply fulfilling, to know that you're protecting like the next family and the next family and the next family. It's a magical ripple.
I I mean, it is just to hear you talk about it and think it, like, you can't help but think about your own birth experience, and it's such a like sacred moment.
It is.
Your life is forever changed, and hopefully it's for the better. And I just think it's
Yeah.
so beautiful that you use that the traumatic experience you had. We have a choice to either
Hmm.
let it change us for the worst, or go like, this can't be the way that it is.
Yeah.
And so I really love that you took the opportunity to, and it's very brave, and you had so much on your plate in your
It
life.
was.
So, I mean, and I hear these stories of like, oh, I can't start a business. And I hear somebody like you who you had all these things against you and reasons not to, but you just kept persevering. And so I hope that that's not lost on listeners, because yes, you can. you know,
Oh, thank you for saying that.
you
Thank
know, I
you.
mean, in the most dire of situations, if you have a calling and you know in you, I have to change this, then by all means, please do that.
Yeah, it's also it really transmuted the overwhelm that I felt. Now, obviously, everybody listening, it would be way better if we had care for new parents and if you could have your basic needs met while you connect with your baby and you heal and recover. So like the system that we are raising our families in, that we're trying to make money within, like all of it is so stacked against us. And so I shouldn't have had to go at a sprint with a newborn in my arms.
Right.
And then every time I got banged down, with big T and little T traumas, and some of them were big ones. Like I lost my dad to suicide a couple years later, like really big things. And I had no social network, or like financial network. I'm estranged from my family. I've always had kind of like this, like snapping at my heels. And so I wish I was creating from a different state.
Mm.
I wish I wasn't creating from a constant fear of, the world falling out from under me and my daughter. And so it can be a really great fuel, and people either like sit down and get buried by it, and that reaction is completely acceptable as well.
Yeah.
And I used it to sprint, and I still find I have to do it, and I'm getting pretty tired of it in my mid 40s, so I like have to do a constant reassessment because I don't have the stamina that I did in my 20s and my 30s, nor the interest to be in that
Mhm.
like hustle that hustle culture. I'm like so passionately against it with my politics of like, truly, for women and queer folks, rest is resistance. Like that's literally how everybody's like, let's smash the patriarchy. I was like, say no to things then. Like, don't do chores for cis men, don't do free labor, don't volunteer. Like this is actually how we're going to get our time and our life and our essence back, is by saying no. And I know you've had a few guests on the podcast that have talked about topics that kind of dance around this with boundaries and like finding that kind of spark again. And the only way to find it is to say no, because it was a little bit inhumane, the sprint that I've been at for the last I wouldn't wish it on anybody. I'm proud. I look back and I'm like, oh, that's really cool. But I mostly think I would have really loved a hug and support, and to do this from a like relaxed state of creation. I don't know if I can create in that state, actually, now that I'm saying it. I might only know how to create with
Yeah.
things snapping at my heels.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you and I are in the same generation, and I think that we were so motivated by this toxic productivity culture that's
Ugh.
getting better, I
Yeah.
think. And I
Yeah.
really have to be an advocate for my children against it, like, and not teaching them that, and like not exhibiting that as much as I can, because it was so ingrained in me too. And great things come of that, but it's not sustainable.
No, it's
It's
not.
just
And
not
that
healthy. It's just,
does your do your kids drive you nuts with their like completely different set of values around hustle culture? Does it
they
rub you the
don't
wrong
drive
way?
me nuts. It's wise.
No, it's
It's,
wise, but it bumps
yeah.
up against me so hard.
Oh
And
yeah. Particularly when it comes to school, I have to be an
yeah,
advocate. It's like, we're not doing that.
yeah, it's a
It's,
lot of unlearning. It's been
oh
a
yeah.
lot of I
Yes.
realize most of the yelling I do at Gray is around productivity, and I have to just stop and be like, that is your stuff, Bianca. She is not measured by what her output is. She is not bad because she didn't do any of her chores today. And I'm trying to find this, how do you be an active part of a community, but without having your worth or your goodness or your, you know, pleasure of being with somebody measured by if you do your chores or your schoolwork or not. It's really, ugh, it's hard unlearning
It's
this.
tough. I totally I was just watching a story about it this weekend. But you're obviously finding a way to have so much impact while being mindful of that. And
Yeah.
so you're also helping bring this much needed healthcare and experience to marginalized people who need it most. So how are you doing that with your business?
Well, I would say collaboration is probably the key to anything that we're doing from a grassroots perspective because like the banks don't care. Through COVID, there was no bailouts. Like nobody's trying to fix reproductive health, obviously. We just keep, that's why pharmaceuticals are like the biggest and surgeries are the biggest. Like the people who are making money have no interest in fixing it. So for us to fix it, we have to go right to the places where the most harm is happening, and the most harm is happening to marginalized communities. No woman walking in the doors is safe. I want to just start there. So there is a bit more privilege for folks who are, cis, hetero, white, able-bodied, owning class. There is some, but none of us are coming out unscathed. But as soon as we start having gender expansive, racialized, big bodied, too young, too old, like people who deem not worthy to have that many children, like whatever the thing is,
Yeah.
um, it's really hard, but we're also trying to show because a lot of the services that bring this support, advocacy, and education have been there's a belief that they're for a certain class and for white people. And so, especially when we talk about doula care or childbirth education or postpartum care, we're working really hard to show like this is amazing for the Latinx community. This is amazing for the Afro-Caribbean community. This is incredible for the newcomers from the MENA region. And so to do that, though, we have to have folks trained from said community because it's I'm not going to be a great salesperson for it's not for white folks for the MENA newcomers from the MENA region. But if I ensure that there's folks from Syria, from Afghanistan, from Iran, from Iraq who are trained and speak the language and truly understand informed consent, then magic happens. And so one of the things that we've done is we have folks that can afford tuition to do that and work within that community. And so they pay for it. But I've also ensured that I set aside somehow, I just always make it work. I set aside enough to provide between 50 and 100 scholarship spots a year. And those all go to representatives of various communities, whether it's the trans community, newcomers, houseless teens, like whatever the group is that we feel is really, I mean, all of them. It's really important that there's advocacy, education, and support. Then we make sure that there's folks who can go in as the representative for there, and they go in and we train them, we support them through their practicum, we give them business training so they know how to talk about their services, and then all of our students get free therapy because we see some stuff. I mean, it's magic. It's incredible being a doula. Like every single time I watch a baby being born, I'm like, I can't believe I got to be a part of this moment. And, we have to unpack our own birth stuff or our family of origin or our families, like, the things that come up when we are in those intimate spaces with other people and families. And as well as the fact we do sometimes witness harm. We have the experience of secondary trauma or reactivation of previous traumas. So I never want unhealed helpers to go out in the world because we can do a lot of harm. So maybe like I'm going to say maybe 7 years ago, we became the first organization, the first and only still, to include free therapy for all students and alumni so that they stay well. And that's something that we're really, really proud of. Yeah.
That's incredible. And I mean, I just think every entrepreneur needs that. And if you don't, at some point on your entrepreneurial journey, you're going to realize it.
Yeah, get a therapist. Get a
Yeah.
therapist.
I mean, it's like, that's just making such a huge impact in people's lives. I mean, that's just incredible. So tell us, what are we getting wrong about, what
Oh,
are our biggest misconceptions about pre and postnatal care? Like, I mean, the
well,
shorter version,
lots.
I know there's a lot.
No, there's lots, but I could boil it down to a few. The main one, and guys, I know I speak about this so passionately, everyone listening, and it might almost take it to the place you expect to see me with like a tinfoil hat on, like and like a billboard on my stomach, standing in a square of a city. Because it sounds nuts, but it's not. And once you're in this world, you see it, and I actually can't unsee it because it's all I do is look at like what's going wrong, like what are they doing to us, what are they doing to our babies. And when you see in the media these stats posted like Black women are 20 times more likely to die in childbirth, that stat feels just like so abstract
I
because
mean,
it's
yeah.
it's
In the
just so hard to
US,
imagine.
I just
It's
can't.
so hard to imagine.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, like, and so people just read it and think like, oh, that sucks, and they go in. But as somebody who's been in the trenches and who has trained thousands of people who are in the trenches, like our healthcare providers are not telling us the truth. They're telling us like, trust your doctor. We all do it. I had to work so hard to unlearn trusting doctors.
Yeah.
And some people, you know, we can have all the arguments. Well, it's not all doctors, and like they're trying to do their best, and it is a system. They're a bigger piece of a system that includes insurance providers, our government, administrators, like pharmaceuticals. Like it's a very complicated cycle. But the point is, when people are walking into the hospital to have a baby, they're walking into this like not what it seems system, that is a one size fits none. So you walk in, you get hooked up to machines, you lay in triage, they do a cervical assessment, none of this with consent. They tell you to take your clothes off, they move you to a room, they break your water, they start Pitocin, they get you the epidural. Maybe the baby doesn't like it, so then you get forceps or vacuum, or you go to the OR. And that's just the birth assembly line. And none of those things are bad. All of those things should be on the table for all birthers, but every person needs to choose and not have it because, you know, none of those things have question marks. They're just like, they're just told to you. And so a lot of times when I talk to people being like, oh, do you have a doula? Like people who are pregnant who have given consent to have any kind of conversation about it. And I'm like, tell me, what's your plan? Do you have a doula? And the number of times people are like, oh, I have a great doctor. And I just want to stop and be like, okay, not everybody can have a great doctor because the stats are showing us a completely different story. We've never had worse outcomes in reproductive health. So never around mortality and morbidity for birthers and their babies. We have the highest rate of women dying in childbirth, the highest rate of children dying in childbirth. And the US has the worst rate on the planet for high GNP countries. So the US is on par with countries that you'd be like, oh, can you believe what it would be like having a baby in the Sudan? I'm like, yes, it's called America. And yet people keep going in believing what they're being told. And so that's the first major step. And then we've distracted parents from really understanding anything about child rearing because, you know, the sleep industry, for example, is a massive one. And we've lost sight of why are we so desperate to force babies to sleep 9 hours a night, which is not possible. Their brain it's like, I'm so passionate about the neuroscience. So the art and science of sleep, they literally cannot. And if a baby is doing it, it's from a place of trauma where they've shut down their system. They've gone into like an extreme life preserving state of like, don't waste your energy making any sound. And it is spiked of cortisol and it's really stressful. None of this is to shame parents. We're being told the healthy thing is for your baby to be sleep trained. And there's a massive industry. It's trillions of dollars around products and these things. And pediatricians are being like, hey, have you started formula yet? Hey, have you sleep trained yet? Hey, have you bought this product yet? Hey, have you given this vaccine? Have you done this? And we just keep raising our children like that. And it's not until we zoom out and all of these problems stem from the fact that, capitalism, we need you to go through and have your baby as fast as possible. And then we need to get back to work as fast as possible. And you can do that by formula, putting your baby, like getting your baby to quote sleep train, like all of these things is this kind of like hurry up and get back to it. And this child rearing and these like really, really, they change us at a cellular level, these spiritual experiences of birth. And it's completely lost. Like when you walk down the labor and delivery ward, you hear like all the lights are on, everybody's talking, the doors are open, everybody has multiple interventions at any given time. Nobody is like treating this as the sacred moment. It looks the same as an oncology floor or a geriatric floor, like literally any other thing, because we've taken this biomedical model and we've lost this magic that involves like things going at their own time, so much love and support and intimacy and protection and safety, and then going into the after of the rest of our lives with our children with, again, that safety and love and support and just like trust, the self-trust. And as long as we don't believe we can do it, which is what happens in birth, we're broken by the system in birth. We leave traumatized. We leave hearing language like failure to progress. Our baby was too big. We couldn't do it on our own. We tried and then needed a C-section. Thank goodness the doctors were there, because that could have been a catastrophe. And so now plant these seeds of like, you actually couldn't do the main thing of even getting your baby out. You needed help. Your body failed you. And then we go into parenting, even if we haven't fully like put it in our conscious brain, that is all in our subconscious of like, you couldn't do step one, like, and now you're expected to do step two without any support of the recovery of the quote failings of step one. And so, it really boils down to, we have to find some way to connect back to this like remembering and this knowing. I've posted everywhere that say women remembering, because that's like my biggest joy will be the day that like some women wake up and they're like, wait, what? I can do it. I didn't fail at it. No, I'm not doing that for you anymore. What? Who said I agreed to this? Wait, why can't I sleep? Wait, when is the, like all the stuff that we're just like, no, absolutely no more. So in a nutshell, it's this, we've been told to trust the system and to trust these books and doctors, and they're blatantly not true. The research isn't accurate. They're not following the guidelines from the World Health Organization. They're not following the guidelines from the American and Canadian Society of Obstetrics and Gynecology. Like none of it is, it's just like the wild, wild west. Short answer.
I mean, just all of it. I mean, it's just like this conversation is so reaffirming because, I was a military spouse when I was a new mom, and the things that I heard, and I mean, I was considered too old to have children at 35 when I had my youngest daughter. I had 0 complications, but I was given all of this grief. I would, I mean, just the aftercare, and luckily I was a confident mom, but I can see where so many women, I was just like, I had this internal thing that I entrusted, and I was like, you're full of crap, like I'm doing my own thing. I was like, I have no idea why you think I need to let my child scream in the bed. That makes 0 sense.
0 cents.
0. I was taking back a crock pot that I bought that didn't work, and this woman asked me what I was doing, and I was like, well, my daughter wants me to hold her so I can't cook something, so when she's napping I put it in the crock pot. And she's like, oh, you need to break her of that. And I'm like,
Yeah.
no, I don't. She's like 18 months old. If she needs me, she needs me. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, well, if you flip it to any other vulnerable person, anytime we talk about sleep, like, just because my commitment is to bring humanity back to it, whatever that looks like for your household, there's no one plan. But when we look at sleep from a humanity perspective, like of being good humans, if you change that to be a senior who was immobile, somebody who is nonverbal, somebody who had had an accident and could no longer like move either temporarily or permanently. And if you switch that player out for baby, so you take baby and instead you change a senior or like somebody else. And then you said, okay, so you go in, you say goodnight. They're trying to tell you that they're scared, hungry, thirsty, worried, anxious, in pain, whatever it is. And they're crying for you, nonverbal, and you close the door. They will keep crying for you. They might throw up on themselves, but you just got to stick it out. You got to stick it out and then go back 12, 10, 9, doesn't matter how many hours, any amount of hours later. And then, if you do it enough times, they'll stop signaling for you. And I'm like, any other case, that's a crime. They would apprehend you if it was a senior or somebody with a disability. You would have your 12-year-old disabled child removed from your home. But yet with babies, our doctors are telling us to do it. Parents, is not your fault. It's not your fault. It's the messaging out there. It's what shows teach us. You are amazing, and you thought it was the best choice because that's what you were told. And instead, get really mad at the fact that we're like, no. Gabor Mate actually recently called it a human rights violation. And it was so validating for me because I've been saying this forever. Because I was like, why are we complicating sleep? It's a pillar of our healthcare. It's like oxygen, of our health. It's like oxygen, food, and water, and sleep are the 4 things that keep us alive. Why are we messing with this?
And I felt, as a mom, I felt so much was wrong with me. There was so much pressure. Like, why is your child not sleeping? And then later, that was one of the major things that was evidence of neurodiversity.
Yeah, I have one of those. I have a spicy spectrum kid.
Nobody ever thought that, or nobody, it's not like it's a message. There's a reason. No, there's something wrong with me or her or both.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
maybe
I know
she is.
it's true. And I, there's so many things, but this starts in pregnancy. This starts in the messaging, and we don't have that generational support. We're a society right now that's been broken, where we don't have our grandmothers come and tell us, this is what you need to do. Instead, we've got these like very weird, kind of clash melting pot of like some adage generational stuff if you're not, a 5th, 6th generation colonizer. And so we have these things, but like they're broken, and then this like, don't spoil them, put them down, put rubbing alcohol on their stump for the umbilical cord, like all these, make sure you circumcise, don't do this, don't get their feet wet. Like, you're like, wait, where's this information? Right. And so we need people who are trained in evidence-based care. And that's where doulas are really filling this gap. And it's making a difference. Unfortunately, we had some research. I'm grateful for the research. It sucks how we had to get it. But over the pandemic, I don't know if anybody remembers, but it got a little weird in healthcare. And they kicked doulas out, and they kicked doulas out for they kicked everybody out. Sometimes even partners couldn't come in labor and delivery. And so we have about, I want to say it's somewhere between 12 and 18 months of research of what happens when doctors are just alone with birthing people. And like, what are the outcomes when there's nobody to witness, nobody to advocate? Like, I use my body and my words to physically protect my clients from harm, without having my clients know that there's a crisis in the room. So it's like really fine balance that I do very well. And I teach you how to do it. If anyone's like, oh man, that sounds scary, I'm like, I'll teach you as a passive person how to do that. But so we have all this research of just like when they get to just run amok, and the outcomes were so terrible. Like the most preterm birth, the most interventions, the most infant and birther mortality and morbidity. And then the research got worse and worse if folks were members of equity seeking groups or in under-resourced areas of the US. And so the study at the end concluded, like, we need to get doulas back in this space because it's the only thing that adds some resistance around that safety and that protection. Because, the type of birth that we've called, quote, normal was that birth that I was talking about, where you go to triage, you like lie in the bed, they do a whole bunch of stuff to you, and hopefully your baby comes out your birth canal. Otherwise, you have the chance of 1 in 3 of a surgical birth. And meanwhile, like, it's long, it's stressful, there's like, people feel disconnected from it. They feel like they never caught up to it. Everybody describes some sort of emergency in their birth, but it's really just an underlying feeling of like stuff felt like it needed to happen because it was going wrong. And that's become the normal birth. Like anytime I talk to people, I ask everybody about the birth experience and they say like, oh, it was just like pretty normal. And then they describe it. And to me, I was like, you have room for so much, like you experienced so much harm, but it's not as bad as somebody else's birth that they've heard. So they're like, it was like 70 hours and they tried inducing like 5 different times and then it didn't work. And so then we did all these things, but I ended up like giving birth with forceps in the OR. And, I had a pretty big episiotomy and I had postpartum mood disorder. And like, I did have to go back for an infection twice, but like, that was, and I was like, what? What? If it had been any other surgery or something like that, and we described that, we've been like, wow, that was a botched appendectomy. But like, that's how we've normalized birth. And that's not normal. That shouldn't be normal.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, I feel like I could talk to you forever. I mean, it's just so important what you're doing. And I also think as entrepreneurs, we could learn a lot from you about how to, you know, have an approach in our businesses where we're, promoting, equity and diversity and actually happiness. So, what are
Yeah.
some tips that, as entrepreneurs, regardless of what type of business you have, what are ways that we can kind of keep that at the forefront of how we're running our businesses?
Well, I mean, I know I sounded very doom and gloom there, but truly my mission is for us to not just overthrow this birth system, but to actually bring joy back to
Right.
parenthood, bring joy back to pregnancy, bring joy back to birth. Birth is a joyful thing. Like this incredible thing is happening for your family, for the world, for this person coming in, and the beyond. And so when I remember that, like even when I talk about it, I get covered in goosebumps. I'm always very cognizant of the thing that I want is joy. So like I have kind of 3 goals. I want people to be informed and understand why it's amazing being a doula. So like that's my kind of in service of the next biggest thing, which is the more doulas we have, the more families are protected, as well as those doulas, because it's typically moms who are drawn to this work, to have a sustainable business that you get to spend the most time with your family, but it's a career that you can actually start at like a part-time number of hours and make somewhere between 50 and $100,000 a year. So it's got a good earning potential, which is something that I really love because so many options available for moms are like minimum wage jobs or MLM, which can end up being a racket for most people. Like they've invested a lot and don't get a lot back out of it. And so to know that there's something that's beyond, babysitting, cleaning houses, doing kind of minimum wage tasks for people, which means you don't actually ever get to have that focused time with your kids because you're doing these kinds of things while you have your kids in the week. And so I think this cycle of finally a solution that you get to be the next level of solving, which is protecting families, while you get to take awesome care of your own and be compensated, and then leads to the bigger one of the more that we have families experience these empowered births and empowered postpartum periods, they'll dial up that like joy meter. So I'm like,
Right.
it's kind of like this 3-wave ripple effect. And my alumni do magical things and they feel so empowered themselves because going through the program, they unlearn so much of this stuff, like what we're talking about today. And so already before they've even taken care of someone, they start changing how they're parenting their children, changing how they're talking to the next generation, realizing that being like, wait, why am I a fast girl? Because I went through puberty early. Like, why am I too much this? Why is my body policed so heavily? Why do we assume girls are going to do this and boys are going to do this? Like, why are we not having conversations about like all of these topics? And so just to see that change happen so immediately, I know this is the solution. Like, I know this is how we can create change within the people impacted. So how women and queer folks, we can make that difference for each other, and then how we raise our children, because it feels impossible when I take the approach of getting different politicians in, like challenging insurance company taking on pharmaceuticals. It's not going to happen. But if we have enough, like this tipping point of women and queer folks and our families making a difference and creating movement of money into feminist flow, like that's exciting to me. And so that's how I keep that message alive in my work that I do, because each one of those is really important and each one needs the other. So it's like this little ecosystem. And so I think for anybody that's looking at their own business, see the like why built in. Because a lot of times I'll say, why are you doing this? I do business consulting. Why are you doing this? And they're like, oh, well, I want to make, I don't know. They're all service things. Like I want to bring delicious food at easy ways to more families. And I'm like, okay, but like why? And we just keep getting it until they understand, okay, I can start getting the farms involved in my program. I can get families involved in cooking. They make better choices. They stop with the like grocery stores that are commodifying us and like just gouging us right now with our grocery bills. And so this is actually a self-sustained ecosystem that is an alternative to going to Walmart and finding it in that. And then your stuff will come through. Your message will be so much more powerful and intentional, and people will see the solution in that, because everybody knows their grocery bill is, I mean, I don't know where you live, Angela, but like when I go in, I'm like, this is 200% more than it was even 6 months ago. And it's stressful. It's so stressful buying groceries. And it used to be something that I really loved doing. So that's how you can take something that seems like a luxury already, because people are like, well, I can barely afford my Walmart grocery bill or my Walgreens, or I don't know. You don't buy food at Walgreens. I'm Canadian, everyone. I try to pick up your chains. But like your food change, and then being like, oh, but how do I get a holistic nutritionist to my food plans? That feels like luxury on luxury. And this is how we can have these services make sense to people. And then they're like, scrap Walmart. Let's go through this local person, and it ends up being the same cost, but you have to communicate that in your business so it makes sense to people right now when everyone's a little stressed about everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I just think being intentional about creating a better quality of life for yourself and everyone in your business and the purpose of your business, it can just make all the difference.
Yeah.
And when you think creatively about it, like you said, the ideas just come. It's just, it's really kind of a magical thing. But I just, gosh, I'm just in this conversation, I'm just overwhelmed by all the goodness that you're doing. And so I
Oh,
just,
thanks, Angela.
it's why I started this podcast. I mean, it's just to connect with women like you and to be able to have a platform to share that with other people who are just feeling alone in what they're doing and what they're thinking. And there's so many messages out there to kind of take us off this path of creating more empowerment for ourselves and better lives for our families. And it's just why these conversations are so important. So,
Yeah.
in the midst of all you're doing, how do you find like some balance for yourself? I mean,
Oh, actually, I do a pretty good job. It's funny you'd ask me this question this week because I'm so wildly out of balance because we've got 2 programs launching. So it's like the worst time I've done. I literally woke up this morning and was like, Bianca, you did that thing you promised yourself you wouldn't do to you. But I do, rest is very non-negotiable for me. I really love some of my hobbies. I have a nice balance of hobbies. So I love jigsaw puzzles, like I try to do 3,000 pieces a week. And it gives me like really good brain thinking time. So I love that, but I also have really active hobbies. So it gives me, I know which one to pick. So I play roller derby, which is very, very physical, very
yeah.
aggressive.
Oh my gosh.
And I do a dance class. I do Irish step dancing, which is a type of tap.
Yeah.
And so,
My daughter
and
used
I
to be an
listen.
Irish step dancer.
Oh,
So
She was. Oh, I started because I moved to the East Coast, and so it's a really big Irish and Scottish influence here. So I was like,
Mhm.
when in Rome, and so
Yep.
I've started Irish step dancing, and I go to the Cayleys and I do my jigs.
Yeah,
Um,
your slip
and
jigs and your
yeah, yeah, and I'm like super into it, but it hits the right amount of like between jigsaw puzzles, dance, and then roller derby. It gives me this really nice balance, and they're non-negotiable. I also have a family that I spend time with, and I like they're just kind of like an always. My wife and daughter. But I have to do these other things, and I got really intentional about that when Gray was little, and I knew I couldn't be like I couldn't have mom be an identifier for me. Like mom is an intimate relationship I have with Gray, but when people ask me, I'd be like, "Oh, I'm an activist. I have lots of tattoos. I play roller derby. I write. I'm a birth worker." And then other things I'd be like, "Oh yeah, and I'm a spouse and I'm a parent." But they don't even I never attached them to my identity in the way that I know a lot of folks do. It's fine that you do that, everybody, as long as you feel like it's deeply fulfilling. It didn't seem deeply fulfilling for me.
Mhm.
Even though I'm really intentional, I'm really committed as a parent with like nonviolent, unlearning my generational traumas, passing on, like really raising a kind, resilient, wonderful person. And so I realize it does take a lot of my priority, but that's Gray. Like I'm shaping Gray to supporting her to go out in the world. Gray is not Bianca. And so I do obviously parenting takes up a lot of time when you have a neurodiverse, spicy teenager. But I just think that all the things I do make sense. They build on each other. Like I do gentle birth practices all week long. So on the weekends, I beat girls up on roller skates. I talk all day long. So then at night, I do silent activities like jigsaw and
Yeah.
think. And I make sure I sleep a lot. I eat foods that my body wants, whatever they are, whenever it is.
I love
Drink a lot of water and truly find my work deeply fulfilling. Like whether I got paid or not, if this feels like an urgent purpose for me on the planet. And so I just know like last night I wanted to hit Netflix next one more time, but I was like, you have a really big day tomorrow and people's lives depend on it. And I was like, that's a good enough thing to self-regulate and go to bed and read my book and wake up at 5:30 in the morning because you have stuff to do.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, I love it. And that's the first time I've ever heard puzzles and roller derby mentioned on
I
the
know.
podcast. So that's awesome. And Irish step dancing. So that's so awesome. I love giving listeners for the long time. I was on this track of like trying to do the self-care that everybody else was doing and not finding what worked for me. And so I love giving those ideas to listeners because you never know until you try what it is that works for you and is your thing. So,
Yeah, it's weird. My
try it
things are
out.
weird. They're all weird. Oh, and I'm learning Spanish. I'm determined to be fluent. So
There
mixing in
you
a
go.
language keeps my brain sharp.
I love that. I mean, I'm sure that it'll be very helpful in your work. So, where do you see Bibo Mia evolving to in the motherhood healthcare space?
Yeah, I'm actually reimagining that right now. I know we're in a pivot year. Like everything's got real clunky and not working smoothly for the last
Mhm.
3 months. And to me, after almost 20 years with my business, that's a sign that it's a reimagined stage, which are terrifying. But I've been really active with some organizations in the US that are very specifically targeting better research and stats around racialized birth. So I actually I'm curious about getting into some of the research and stats portion, which feels exciting. And I think because my daughter graduates soon, so she'll be off at university, that I might take a couple years. I'm saying this here first so I can be held some kind of documented accountability. And I might do some traveling and gathering some of the stories around traditional midwifery as a challenge to the biomedical model. So I think I might do something like real out there and I mean, I can't go back to backpacking because I need nice sheets and a dark room for my sleep hygiene. But like something like that and going to some remote corners of the world and really bringing that conversation back around what that looks like. So I know that this is a pivot year, 2024, but I don't know what that fully looks like. So I'm in dream up, which is scary. It feels limitless.
But exciting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yes.
I mean, you have given us so much passion and so much inspiration today. If you had like a takeaway or a few takeaways for listeners, what would that be?
I think one of the main ones would be trusting yourself first and foremost, like check into your intuition. What do you want? Anything that we listen to, whether you're reevaluating an element of your business, whether you're expecting, whether you're trying to maybe do a career pivot, start listening to what you actually want would be a first one. And if you are curious about doing birth work, your own birth might have held a story for you, or like you just have a calling. We call you birth nerds. So welcome to the Birth Nerd Club. We'd love for you to come just check out what that can look like. We have tons of ways of both free and paid to hang out in our community and see how you can fit into birth work. And we actually teach a lot about your life that you currently have. So you might be an amazing copywriter. And so you go through our program and we teach you how to do copywriting for reproductive health and justice, because people always need specific technical practices like that. So that's something that we're really proud of, is that kind of merge. So you might not know what you want to do within reproductive health and justice, but if you feel called to protect families and babies and bellies, we'd love to have you come hang out so that you can explore that a little bit, and no pressure. See how it fits.
Yeah, and where can they connect with you and learn more about Vibomia?
Yeah, so you can check us out at bebomia.com. I will spell it for you because
Okay.
BEBOMIA.com. We have a page that's a really great entry point for listeners. So if you go to /good enough, we're also really active on Facebook and Instagram. So you can find us at Bebomia Inc. Again, BEBOMIAINC is our handle for all social channels. And so you can see,
I'll leave a link in the show notes.
yeah, that'd be great.
That's awesome. It's been absolutely wonderful connecting with you and affirming and a conversation I needed to hear today. So I appreciate you being on the podcast so much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Angela. I love your pod a lot. I think
Oh,
it's a great one.
that means a lot. Thank you so much.